I used my emergency fund to fill their barren pantry. His mother scoffed, acting like you own the place. His sister emptied a bag of flour on the floor. He just smirked. I left with only my handbag. They ridiculed me for stalking their home. I walked away in silence. Fate delivered its lesson, and they never forgot. The wedding portrait on the wall taunted me each morning. There I was, radiant in ivory lace, Leo's arms securely around my waist, encircled by smiling faces that now hardly met my gaze. 3 months, 92 days of chipping away at the walls of a house that felt more like a stranger's territory than a home. "Morning, dear." Eleanor's voice floated from the kitchen, syrupy sweet but with an undercurrent sharp enough to sting. I walked down the stairs, already braced for what I would find. Greasy pans in the sink, coffee grinds dusting the countertop, and that signature smile that never touched her cold blue eyes. "I made a fresh pot of coffee," I offered, nodding toward the machine I'd set up before anyone else was awake. How considerate. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. She poured a cup, adding a splash of milk with painstaking slowness. Though I do find I prefer it a bit richer. Leo always gets the blend just right. My stomach clenched, but I just nodded. "I'll make a note of that." Leo ambled in a few minutes later, his hair a mess, still dressed in the crumpled shirt from the day before. He pecked his mother's cheek, emotion so ingrained it looked robotic, then gave me the polite, distant look reserved for a houseguest who had long overstayed. "Morning," he muttered, his eyes already glued to his phone. "I left your lunch on the counter," I said, pointing to the neatly packed container I'd made at dawn. "Thanks." He didn't bother to look up. The Leo who once sent me heart emojis during his lunch break was gone, lost somewhere between "I do" and "welcome to my mother's" house. Chloe's footsteps pounded down the stairs, her arrival announced like a coming storm. At 26, she moved through the home with the supreme confidence of someone who had never had to lift a finger, never been asked to contribute, the perpetual princess of this little kingdom. "Well, look at someone being productive," she said, her eyes scanning the tidy kitchen with theatrical surprise. "Playing house again, are we?" A flush of heat crept up my neck. "Just trying to help out." How very noble. She snatched a banana from the fruit bowl I'd arranged, peeling it with a flourish. "Though I think Mom has managed this house perfectly well for 30 years without a private chef." Leo said nothing. He just scrolled, his focus on the screen absolute. I waited, a silent plea in my heart for him to say something, to defend me, to remind his sister that I was his wife, not a hired hand they'd reluctantly taken in. The silence grew, becoming another tiny tear in the fabric of our marriage. "I should get ready for work," I said to the empty air. In the bathroom, the mirror showed me a stranger, a woman who had foolishly believed love could be earned with perfectly ironed shirts and sparkling floors. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. "Marriage isn't about keeping a perfect house, my love. It's about building a life together." But how can you build anything when you're the only one? With a hammer? I spent my lunch hour at a local market, making a mental list of Eleanor's favorite dishes. She'd once reminisced about her mother's shepherd's pie. Maybe if I could recreate it, if I could get the flavor just right, she'd finally see me as more than a nuisance. That evening, I got to work. The kitchen filled with the savory scent of simmering meat and vegetables. For a fleeting moment, I felt a sense of belonging, even if it was just in this temporary bubble of culinary creation. "Smells good," Leo remarked, leaning against the doorframe. "It's your mom's favorite." I found a recipe that sounded like the one she described. A flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise, maybe even a hint of respect. "She'll like that." But when Eleanor tasted it later, her only comment was a slight nod. "Not quite like my mother's, but passable." Passable. The word clung to me as I lay in bed that night, a cold weight on my chest. Week after week, I refined my act. I learned Chloe liked her tea with a splash of honey. I found out Leo hated when his socks were folded instead of rolled. I memorized Eleanor's schedule, making sure the living room was pristine before her weekly book club. But with every act of service, I felt a piece of myself vanishing. The confident woman who once led team meetings was now tiptoeing around conversations, afraid to say the wrong thing. I was a ghost in my own marriage, haunting a life I could never truly claim. One especially difficult Friday, I walked in on Chloe and her friends lounging in the living room, their shoes propped up on the coffee table I'd just polished. "So, you're the famous wife," one of them drawled, looking me over as if I were an exhibit. "Chloe says you're quite the little homemaker." The way she said it made the word sound like an insult. "I try to do my part," I replied, hating the weakness in my voice. "How adorable," another one added. "It's like having live-in help, but you don't have to pay them." Their laughter echoed in the hall as I walked away, each chuckle a tiny pinprick against my worn-out dignity. That night, as I stared at the ceiling while Leo snored beside me, I came to a decision. Eleanor's birthday was coming up. It was the perfect chance to show them who I was, beyond the quiet compliance and forced smiles. Not a maid, not a convenience, but a woman of substance and worth. I had my savings, my resolve, and a dangerous sliver of hope. What could go wrong? The calendar on my phone was a glowing reminder in the dark. April 10th, circled in red. Eleanor's 65th birthday, just 2 weeks away. I searched through family text threads and social media, looking for any mention of plans, a party, or even a simple acknowledgement. There was nothing. It was as if the day didn't exist, as if daughters-in-law weren't supposed to make a fuss. But I wanted to. I needed to. The next morning, my hands shook as I opened my banking app. My emergency fund stared back at me. $5,000, saved meticulously over 4 years. It was money for a broken-down car, a sudden illness, one of life's unpredictable emergencies. Suddenly, that money felt trivial compared to the chance of earning a real, genuine smile from the woman who had raised my husband. The specialty grocer became my battlefield. I moved through the aisles with a singular focus, filling my basket with ingredients that felt like luxuries. Prime rib for her favorite Sunday roast, organic heirloom carrots that cost a small fortune, and a tiny vial of truffle oil the shopkeeper kept behind the counter like it was a state secret. "Big celebration?" the butcher asked as he wrapped the roast. "The most important one of my life," I answered, the honesty of the words surprising me. At a gourmet bakery across town, I found it. The imported chocolate from a Belgian chocolatier. Eleanor had mentioned in passing, describing a trip she'd taken in her youth. The cashier rang up $45 for a single bar, and I paid without flinching. My kitchen became a secret laboratory. Every night, after Leo was absorbed in his tablet and Chloe had vanished into her room with a bag of takeout, I transformed into a culinary artist. Recipe cards covered the counters, filled with my frantic notes and revisions. Tuesday prime. Rib was slightly overcooked. Reduce heat by 10 degrees. Wednesday. Potatoes were too dense. Use a ricer instead of a masher. Thursday. The gravy was the key. A dash of Worcestershire sauce made all the difference. I tasted and retasted, my palate becoming attuned to what I prayed were Eleanor's exact preferences. My back ached and my fingers were raw from chopping, but with every minor success, a fragile hope began to grow inside me. The phone call started on a Friday. I hid in the spare bedroom, speaking in low tones to relatives I'd only met once at the wedding. "Aunt Judith? This is Leo's wife, Clara. I know we don't know each other well, but I'm planning a surprise for Eleanor's birthday." Her voice was instantly warm. "Oh, Clara, that's just lovely. Eleanor hasn't had a real party in ages. What do you need me to do?" One by one, I called them. Cousin Brenda, who lived 2 hours away but promised she'd make the drive. Uncle Robert, who gruffly admitted he'd been meaning to visit for months. Niece Sophie, whose 2 young sons were thrilled at the prospect of a party for Grandma Ellie. Each yes was a small victory, proof that someone in this family saw Eleanor's value, even if her own children seemed oblivious. She always said, "You were a sweetheart," Judith confided in a later call. "Eleanor lights up when she talks about how considerate you are." My heart leaped. She talks about me? Of course she does, dear. You're her family now. She might not be the best at showing her feelings, you know how she is, but she sees everything you do for that house. I hung up the phone, feeling dizzy with relief. Maybe I wasn't invisible. Maybe beneath that cold exterior, Eleanor was just a woman who had forgotten how to accept kindness. The menu grew more ambitious. I decided appetizers were a must. She'd once praised the bruschetta at a restaurant. I spent hours researching wine pairings, finally choosing a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon that cost more than my weekly fuel budget. The house would be filled with flowers, an atmosphere worthy of the woman I was so desperate to impress. My credit card bills were staggering, but I archived the email alerts without looking. This wasn't about money, it was about love. 3 nights before the party, I tackled my showstopper, a decadent chocolate lava cake with a molten center. The first batch was a disaster, the center refusing to melt. The second was overbaked and dry. By the third attempt, my hands were trembling with fatigue, but the cakes emerged from the oven, perfect and beautiful. I took a picture, my eyes wet with tears, not of frustration, but of pure, unadulterated hope. This was love, baked into existence. Leo found me in the kitchen after midnight, surrounded by a mountain of dirty dishes and receipts. "What is all this?" he asked, his curiosity genuine for the first time in what felt like forever. "Your mother's birthday is on Sunday." I waited for the spark of recognition, for him to offer help, to show some sign that he cared. "Oh, right. We should probably pick up a card for her." A card. After all this, he thought a simple card would be enough, but I just smiled. "Don't worry," I said. "I have it all under control." And I did. I had the food, the guests, the decorations, the love. Everything but the guarantee that it would matter to the people who were supposed to matter most. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, a beautiful day for a betrayal. I'd been up since 4 a.m., my body buzzing with a mixture of nervous excitement and bone-deep exhaustion from weeks of secret work. The kitchen was my command center, every countertop and burner playing a role in the grand performance I had designed. The air was thick with the aromas of my efforts, the savory scent of roasting, garlic, the rich smell of melting chocolate. Turmeric and paprika stained my fingertips, a testament to the spice blend I'd perfected. My hair was a disaster, tied back with a rubber band from the junk drawer, and a thin sheen of sweat covered my forehead as I moved with practiced efficiency. In the quiet of the early morning, the house felt like it was mine. I hummed a tune my mother used to sing in the kitchen, a song about how a little bit of love makes everything sweeter. The melody was a prayer, turning the simple act of cooking into something sacred. Each diced onion was a wish. Each measured teaspoon of spice was a hope. The expensive Belgian chocolate I'd splurged on waited to be transformed into a dessert worthy of a queen. This wasn't just meal prep. It was an act of alchemy, turning simple ingredients into tangible love. My phone buzzed with last-minute confirmations. Judith would be there by 2. Brenda was bringing her famous potato salad. Robert had picked up the extra ice I'd asked for. The guest list had swelled to 15 people, all of them excited to celebrate a woman they professed to love but seldom made time for. I wiped my brow with the back of my hand, leaving a faint streak of cocoa powder on my skin like a warrior's mark. Everything was going according to plan. The creak of the floorboards overhead signaled that someone was awake. My heart jumped, but I kept my focus on my tasks. Just a few more hours of secrecy, and then the big reveal. I imagined Eleanor's face, her shock and joy as she walked into a house full of people who loved her, surrounded by the smells of her favorite foods. Footsteps descended the stairs, slow and deliberate. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her hair in curlers, her robe pulled tight. Her eyes did a slow, critical sweep of the scene, the ingredients laid out, the pots simmering, the organized chaos of my loving ambition. "Morning," I said cheerfully, not looking up from my work. "Did you sleep well?" She didn't respond right away. She walked further into the kitchen, her slippers whispering against the linoleum. She inspected my work like a drill sergeant inspecting the barracks, taking in the high-quality ingredients, the sheer scale of the operation. Then she spoke, her voice like ice. "Acting like you own the place already." The knife in my hand froze over a half-chopped bell pepper. The words struck me with the force of a slap, sucking the air from my lungs. I turned, my mind scrambling, for an explanation, for a sign that this was a joke, a test. But her eyes were flat, hard, and genuinely annoyed, as if I had committed a grave offense by daring to care this much. Before I could find my voice, Chloe's whined from the hallway. "What is all that racket? People are trying to sleep." She shuffled in moments later, her face a mask of sleepy irritation. Her eyes fell on the mountains of prepped food, the expensive chocolate, the prime rib resting on the counter. Without a word, she picked up a large bag of flour from the pantry, walked over to where I was standing, and upended it on the floor near my feet. The white powder billowed out, settling over the clean tiles in a fine, mocking dust. "Well, somebody is. Certainly desperate for attention," she sneered, a cruel smirk on her face. The flour puffed up around my shoes as I instinctively stepped back, each particle a tiny testament to my shattered dream. This wasn't right. This couldn't be real. Not after everything. Leo's footsteps were the last to arrive, drawn by the eye disturbance. He took in the scene with a tired gaze, his mother's rigid posture, his sister's smug grin, and me, standing in a cloud of flour, my heart in pieces on the floor. I looked at him, my eyes begging him to be my husband, to defend me, to make this right. He just shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that broke me completely. "Maybe take it down a notch. No one asked you to be a hero." The words were the final blow. My hands went numb. The humming in my heart stopped. The hope withered and died. A hot flush spread across my face, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was the burn of a terrible, liberating clarity. They didn't want my effort. They didn't want my love. They wanted me to be small, to be silent, to be grateful for the scraps of affection they threw my way. I was a tool, not a member of the family. The flour settled around my feet, and for the first time, I saw the truth that had been right in front of me all along. The silence after Leo's words was deafening. I stood there, a statue in a snowstorm of flour, waiting for a flicker of remorse, an apology, anything. But Eleanor just stepped around the mess to get to the coffee machine. Chloe let out a theatrical yawn and declared she was going back to sleep. Leo grabbed his phone and retreated to the living room. They just left me there. Slowly, mechanically, I bent down and started to clean, but my movements were robotic. The beautiful ingredients I had so carefully arranged now seemed to be mocking me, silent witnesses to my utter foolishness. The rest of the day passed in a haze of their casual indifference. Eleanor watched TV, Chloe scrolled through social media. At the kitchen table, deliberately avoiding the area I was cleaning, and Leo typed away on his laptop, acting as if the morning's cruelty had never happened. But I hadn't forgotten. As evening approached, something inside me didn't break. It solidified. The lock I'd been fumbling with for months finally clicked into place. I waited until the house fell into its usual quiet rhythm. Then, I began my real work. I moved through the kitchen with the quiet precision of a ghost reclaiming her stolen property. Every expensive ingredient, every carefully chosen item, every piece of my shattered hope, I took it all back. The prime rib went into a cooler bag first, all 6 pounds of it. My movements were calm, deliberate. This wasn't revenge, it was a reckoning. Next came the Belgian chocolate, still in its pristine wrapper, a symbol of a celebration for people who didn't deserve one. Jar by jar, I cleared the pantry of my contributions. The imported truffle oil, the aged balsamic, the gourmet spices I'd spent hours sourcing. Each one represented my time, my money, my heart. The refrigerator gave up its treasures easily. The organic vegetables, the block of artisan cheese, the ingredients for the lava cakes. I found the birthday candles I'd bought, 65 of them, one for each year of a life I'd tried to honor. They felt like tiny monuments to my own naivete. The expensive Cabernet went into a separate bag, a $150 bottle chosen to mark a milestone for a woman who couldn't even offer a kind word. What a fool I'd been. My phone started buzzing. It was the relatives. Aunt Judith asking what time to arrive. Brenda confirming she was on her way with the potato salad. Robert texting that he'd picked up the ice. I looked at the messages, my heart aching for these kind people, driving toward a house filled with nothing but cold indifference. My fingers flew across the screen. Plans have changed. Eleanor isn't feeling up for a celebration after all. The replies were instant: confusion, concern. Judith's voicemail was filled with genuine disappointment. These people had been ready to share their love with someone who couldn't be bothered to receive it. I deleted the entire group chat. The kitchen looked sterile now, stripped of the life and potential I had poured into it. It was just a room in a house that was never my home. I found a pen and a sticky note. I wrote just 4 words: feed your own ego. I stuck it to the inside of the now empty pantry door, where Eleanor would eventually find it when she went looking for something that was no longer there. My duffel bag was packed in minutes. 3 months of marriage and all my true belongings fit into one bag. I left the wedding portrait on the wall. It belonged to the naive girl who still believed in fairy tales, not the woman who was walking out the door. I called Maya, my friend from college who had been sending worried texts for weeks. "Is your couch available for a bit?" "Of course," she answered immediately. "What happened?" "I'll tell you when I'm there." The front door clicked shut behind me. There was no grand exit, no screaming match, no final confrontation. I simply walked away from the house that had never welcomed me, carrying only what was mine and a quiet dignity I had finally remembered how to wear. The cool night air felt like a cleansing breath, filling my lungs with the first taste of freedom I'd had in months. Maya's couch was my safe harbor. I spent the day wrapped in a borrowed blanket, sipping tea that tasted warm and real. I'd left my phone face down, its silence a welcome comfort. But at precisely 6:15 p.m., it began to vibrate uncontrollably, a relentless, angry buzz. I flipped it over. Judith's name flashed on the screen, then Brenda's, then Sophie's. A flood of missed calls and frantic texts was painting a vivid picture. "Clara, we're outside Eleanor's house, but no one is answering." "Are we at the right place?" "Brenda drove 2 hours for this. What is going on?" Maya came out of her room, toweling her hair. "Is your phone okay?" "It's happening," I said softly, and she seemed to understand. The doorbell at Eleanor's house would have rung at 6:30, I knew because I'd timed it. The sound would have ripped through the quiet indifference of their evening. My phone rang again. It was Uncle Robert. "Clara, what in the world is going on?" His voice boomed. "Brenda is standing on the porch holding a bowl of potato salad, and none of us know why we're here." Through the speaker, I could hear the confused murmurs of the other guests. "Robert, I'm not there anymore." "What do you mean you're not there? You organized this whole thing." The weight of it all hit me. These people had changed their plans, driven for hours, all because I'd made them believe someone cared enough to throw a party. "I have to go," I whispered, but Robert cut me off. "Hang on, someone's coming to the door." A sick part of me had to listen, had to hear the collision of my hope with their reality. Leo's voice, muffled but clear. "Oh, hi everyone. We weren't expecting anyone." Aunt Judith's confusion was sharp. "Expecting anyone? Leo, honey, Clara invited us for your mother's birthday party. Where is she?" The silence that followed was heavy and long. Then, Chloe's voice, laced with venom. "She's not here, and there is no party. I don't know what that girl told you." "What do you mean there's no party?" Brenda's voice was filled with the indignation of a woman whose famous potato salad had been made in vain. "She called me herself, said Eleanor deserved a special day. We planned this for weeks." More silence, thick with unspoken accusations. Then Robert's voice, closer to the phone now. "Where is your wife, Leo?" "She left yesterday." The collective gasp was audible even through the phone. 15 people on a doorstep, realizing they were props in the final sad act of a failing marriage. Sophie, younger and bolder, asked the question on everyone's mind. "She left? Why would she leave right before a party she planned?" Leo's reply was a barely audible mumble. "There was a misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Judith's voice had turned firm, the tone of a teacher who would not be lied to. This time, Eleanor herself answered, her voice brittle with defensiveness. "She was being presumptuous, acting like she ran this house, We never asked for any of this." The silence that followed was different. It was shocked. The quiet that falls when people witness a profound failure of character. Uncle Robert, usually the peacemaker, spoke with an icy calm I'd never heard. "Presumptuous? She was trying to honor you, Eleanor. She called every last one of us bursting with excitement about celebrating you. She said you deserve to feel special. Well, nobody asked her to. Nobody asked her to love you?" Judith's voice cut through Eleanor's protests like a surgeon's scalpel. Nobody asked her to pour her own time, her own money, and her own heart into trying to make you happy? My hand tightened on the phone. These people, who barely knew me, understood everything. Brenda's voice joined the chorus, trembling with emotion. "I made potato salad for 30 people. Robert drove from 2 towns over. Judith moved her book club. We did this because that sweet girl made us believe you were worth celebrating. And where is she?" "She overreacted," Leo said, his voice small and defeated. "Made a scene over nothing." "Nothing?" Sophie's laugh was cold. "She invited your entire family to honor your mother, and you call that nothing?" I couldn't listen anymore. I ended the call, my hands shaking not with sadness, but with a strange sense of validation. Strangers had seen my value more clearly than the man I had married. Maya came and sat beside me as my phone continued to buzz. Messages of support, apologies, and one text that made my throat close up. It was from Judith. "That family doesn't deserve you, Clara, but we see you. We saw what you tried to do." Judith's text was a small light in the darkness, but I set the phone aside. The buzzing had stopped, and the silence that remained was my own. It was a peaceful silence, not the heavy, oppressive quiet of Leo's house. "You good?" Maya asked, curling up in the armchair opposite me. "I think so," I said, surprised by how true it felt. "Actually, I think I'm better than good." She smiled, the kind of smile that knows all your history. "You look it. Lighter." I did feel lighter, as if I'd finally set down a massive, invisible weight. The constant ache in my shoulders was gone. I could breathe. "I need to get some air," I said, mostly to myself. Air that doesn't feel like it belongs to someone else. The night was cool and quiet. I walked aimlessly, letting my feet lead me away from the wreckage of the last few months. A few blocks from Maya's apartment, I found a small cafe I'd never seen before. "The Cozy Corner," said a modest sign in a window glowing with warm, inviting light. Inside, I saw mismatched chairs, local art, and the kind of peaceful atmosphere I hadn't realized I was starving for. The bell on the door tinkled softly. "What can I get for you?" the barista asked with a kind, undemanding smile. "A black tea, please." My eyes scanned the pastry case and landed on a simple, fudgy brownie. "And one of those." "Good choice. My mom makes those." The word mom didn't sting. It just sounded nice. A beloved recipe, shared without expectation. I found a small table by the window. The tea came in a chipped ceramic mug, the brownie on a simple plate. They were perfectly imperfect. No performance, no pretense. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, the first sip of tea strong and comforting. The brownie was rich and dense, a simple satisfaction that no fancy dessert could ever replicate. Outside, life went on. A young family walked by, the parents, laughing at something their child said. An older couple strolled arm in arm, their movements a silent conversation built over years of shared moments. I took another bite of brownie and realized I was smiling, a real smile, not the carefully constructed one I'd worn for months. When was the last time I'd felt this? Before the wedding, for sure. Before I started shrinking myself to fit into a space that was never meant to hold me. My phone was silent in my purse. No calls from Leo, Eleanor, or Chloe. Their silence was the most honest thing they'd ever given me. It wasn't a punishment, it was a relief. I had been fighting for a love that was never on the table, trying to earn a place in a family that had already closed its ranks. A woman at another table packed up her things and caught my eye. She smiled, a simple human gesture of shared existence. I smiled back, and it felt as natural as breathing. This moment, this peace, this was mine. It was freedom from the exhausting, impossible job of trying to be someone else. I wasn't waiting for approval or validation anymore. I was just here, in this moment, drinking my tea, feeling whole, and finally being exactly where I was supposed to be. If this story of quiet dignity and self-respect had you completely captivated, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when she silently reclaimed every single ingredient she'd bought, taking back her power one item at a time. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of finding your worth. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.